It's uncut, it's unfiltered. This is the show of shows. This is the biggest names in drag racing. No holds barred.
Speaking his mind.
I've never had a problem expressing my opinions, but what we're doing here is bigger than that. These are conversations that need to be had in an unfiltered way.
Exploring hot topics.
Drag racing's all I've ever done. It's all I care to do.
And spreading the gospel of drag racing.
I respect the history. I appreciate how far we've come, but I want more for this sport, and I'll fight for it. This is the great American motorsport, drag racing.
The West Buck Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
Hey gang, Westbuck here, and according to Stevie Fast Jackson, every screw-blown pro mod on the planet Earth is capable of running bottom 570s at 260 miles an hour. Anyways, guys, welcome to the Westbuck Show. In today's episode, Erica Enders wins again. Shocker, Stevie Jackson lowers the boom on the NHRA Pro Mod field in Norwalk. The sport loses 2 more legends. Mike Salinas is steady stacking up Wallies, and Ryan Martin wins again. We begin today with what seems to be a massively hot topic in the sport of drag racing. I'm going to ask you right now, Mike, what do you think? Is it a bigger story that Erica Enders has won 5 of the last 8 races, or Steve Torrence being 0 for 10 here as we hit the halfway point of the Camping World NHRA Drag Racing Series?
You know, we got to keep it positive, man. So it's got to be Erica winning 5 of 8 on a warpath that we haven't seen in possibly 18 years, maybe since Greg Anderson went on an unbelievable streak in 2004. Also, I think Steve, as he reminded us in his interview with Amanda Music at the top,
you caught that, eh?
Yeah, he's not. When we ask, is he going to turn it around or what's happened with that program? They're still 3rd in the points, I believe, after Norwalk. So it's not like if he was not qualifying, if he was, at the bottom and struggling or going out first round, that'd be one thing. But they just haven't had a win. But they've had relative success other than that. So I think it's got to be Erica's streak.
He's a victim of his own success right now, right?
Yeah,
it's a classic
our
example.
Expectations are way too high.
Our expectations of Steve Torrence and those Capco boys out of Texas, man, we expect them to win every time they unload that thing. And they've done a whole lot of that, right? Absolutely dominant force in Top Fuel racing. I'm not convinced. I mean, there's been very few teams that have entered that Steve Torrence kind of realm. And it is, I think we're all just, it's like a shock to the system to not be seeing winner's circle photos with Steve Torrence in them. I mean, I'm looking for Ray-Bans and a hat pulled down low. I'm looking for Steve Torrence in the winner's circle. I will say that I do think it's a huge story, and I'm with you on the positivity train, that Erica Enders is 5 for 8 in 2022, off to the best start of her career. We've never seen this kind of early dominance from her. You mentioned Greg Anderson. 2004, he won 15 of 24 races, and we've done a little bit of math behind the scenes here, and we feel like there is potential.
Is not really, it's not our strong suit. So
not our
bear
strong
with
suit.
us on this.
I actually was going to introduce a new segment in the show, but we ran out of time. Where I was going to say like missteps and mistakes, things that we will come back to because we will inevitably screw something up. But man, it's been a long time since we've seen something quite like this. Now, granted, Erica's been on some roles of her own in relatively recent history, but man, this just feels different. And I love to talk about positive things and good things going on. And this is a really special moment. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but what could this lead to? I mean, will we see her sweep the swing? Will we see her win a 5th world title? I mean, there's so many things. And I don't know about you, man, but there just feels to be, I've said it before here, but it's a chip on Erica's shoulder. Something is going on. You can see her racing and maybe it's just the fashion in which they lost last year. We've heard her talk that she didn't really know what that felt like to be this close. I mean, she's had dominating runs and had it locked up by Vegas, but to lose it at the last race of the season, that was definitely a different experience for her.
They've also come from behind and thrown a Hail Mary for a touchdown at the end of the season, man. I mean, so we've seen it both ways with this team, and it is a kind of a new position for her to be dominant early in the season. I don't think that outside her 2015 season, I believe was that the dominant one that she had on
painfully
the way to the championship.
Yes.
And we haven't seen that since then. And back to the math, which I derailed you with my comment about our math skills. But 12, if she were to go if she were to win 12 of 19 races, that's a better win percentage than Greg's 2004 season, in which he won 15 out of 24. So we'll see if she sweeps the swing. That's the other thing that's on the horizon. We're now entering the Western swing. That hasn't happened since Greg Anderson in 2004 in pro stock. So we'll see what this holds for her. But I mean, it's all systems go.
Well, here's
right
the
now.
other thing about it that we're not talking about is that at least going to Norwalk, that was a thorough ass whipping, right? I mean, let's call it what it is.
Number one qualifier.
Number one qualifier, ran through them guys like a hot knife through
I think she
butter.
was number one by like 400s on Saturday night, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, she clipped the whole. She went at 63, and the rest of the
I was
field.
on vacation.
53, right?
Yeah.
And the rest of the field went at
wasn't able to watch it.
57. You know, I mean, like, can you imagine how demoralizing that would be? Like, to be up there in the lanes, like, oh man, we got her hopped up. You know, we're really throwing the kitchen sink at it, and Erica goes out there and clips the whole field by 4 numbers. That
doesn't happen in pro stock. I mean, it happens in these other classes. It can happen in field classes, pro mod, but for someone to go low by that big of a margin in pro stock is unheard of.
It's a big story, and I think there's going to be a couple of questions that remain to be answered. Like, is there any concern of being too hot too soon? There's a whole lot of drag racing left to do, right? We're 8 races in. They've got 10 to go. You know, they got 10 more stops to make. Can you maintain this? I do think that they're a team that has good luck and is strong in poor conditions. Like, that whole group, there's so many smart people involved. Mark Ingersoll, obviously one of the best to ever do it when it comes to calling shots on these cars. The brain trust that has been assembled around that hot rod. Jake Harrison on the keyboard and calling the shots on the engine, Kyle at the engine shop. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are involved in this deal, and to see them, you know, I would not be at all surprised to see them continue this dominance here through the summer.
Yeah,
because absolutely. I think that's when they're really good. When the track, you know, isn't what it is in the spring or in late fall, they can be a difference maker, right? They race all the time. They test all the time. So they definitely have an advantage in these hot summer months, man. But it's going to be fun to watch.
The class is so close. No one's out of it. And even like, I think on the broadcast, I heard Brian Lone say that Greg Anderson has lost 6 races by hole shots this year. So he's got a good car. He even admitted in his post-race interview, he's just, you know, losing concentration on race day, and he's got to work on it and kind of get back on the horse. But, you know, he's a mental checkup away from being right there with him.
I agree. I mean, like you said, top 5 in points, but maybe the story and perhaps the question should have been, how about those elite motorsports cars? Because it's really, they've won 7 of 8 races.
Aaron and Erica in the finals.
Aaron and Erica. Yeah, it's a very, very dominating performance that, again, I don't think we've seen in a hot minute. And I have questions. I have questions as to what happens next, because there's always been these questions around Erica, like, when's it end? How long does she keep doing this? She's a young woman, obviously still, but she's got a life to live. I'm sure she has other interests or whatever beyond the racetrack. And you start to thinking about the season that she's having, the potential of winning 5 NHRA Pro Stock World Championships. I think that thrusts her into greatest ever territory, certainly in pro stock, but perhaps part of the overall drag racing conversation as an all-time great. Wins enough, right? I mean, you start to wonder, like, hey, go out on top. You know, you see in other sports, you see people hang around for a really long time and it kind of gets ugly.
Right.
You know,
that happens more often than not.
It does, man. And a lot
Very
of times
few people know when to step away.
And when you see someone having this kind of success, and I'm not trying to like necessarily put that into the atmosphere, but when you see the edge that Erica is racing with here in 2022, and you see I just feel like I continue to hear comments from her about enjoying the ride, not knowing when it's going to end, enjoying every moment, treating them all like it's her last. And you can just sense there's some finality or something amid going on. It really does feel that way. And I mean, hey, you can't, if she quit today, if she walked out of drag racing tonight at 5 at the end of business, she would have nothing to hang her head about. Right. Yeah. I mean, she's had an incredible career, and you think back, listening to her top end interview over the weekend, down there on the big end of Norwalk Summit Motorsports Park, in Ohio talking to Amanda Busick, she mentioned, like, I've been in pro stock for 18 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people are quick to forget the driving for Jim Cunningham and they couldn't qualify if they had
she was
14, 15 cars.
She was winless in her first 7 seasons.
Yeah,
That's a good, I mean, you can make a book about the story. We've talked about that. Everyone now sees the success and the domination and the winning and the chip on her shoulder and want to make judgments about, you know, how she handles her interview or handles herself. But you got to know that you may have missed that this
has been a hard fought battle. Yeah,
she fought for 7 years to stay. And most people, as a young female driver, would have been out of there after the first couple of years of not winning and not having success. But she stuck with it, did what it took to get a ride with various teams, a lot like Leah Pruitt. Leah did what it took to, you know, get on with smaller teams and work her way up through the part-time ranks. And now she's with, you know, fully funded, arguably the best funded Top Fuel team, and has been for several years back to the DSR days. But it's very similar to that. And I think maybe Leah probably goes through a lot of that same stuff as well, where we're so quick to forget about how long these people have been battling to get to the level that they are now. Same for Steve Torrence. Even we were talking about Steve to start this segment, junior dragster racer, worked up through the ranks, sportsman racer. And now he's among the most dominant Top Fuel teams, but it didn't just happen overnight.
We forget those early struggles. We forget that story. And I can't imagine pro stock specifically. We've seen this category eat people up. I mean, it has. I mean, people come into pro stock with the greatest of intentions and they've got the resources and they've got sponsors. And in 365 days, you never hear from them again. I mean, I can think of a lot of people that have come in with big resources, all the right parts and pieces, and within a couple of years, the deal's for sale. It's on racingjunk.com. You know, I mean, it's somebody else is racing out of their rig. I mean, it happens quite frequently.
It does,
you know, and to think about someone like, no wonder she's a little salty. No wonder sometimes we see some edge shown by these drivers, especially the ones who have had to fight tooth and nail. I think that's honestly been a lot of the catalyst for the perceived rivalry between Erica Enders and Camry Caruso, right? EE versus CC. I think, and I'm speaking for them, but I can't help but feel like Erica Enders looks at that and goes, I raced for 7 years before I even got a sniff, before I even got close.
And it was a much different environment then too, because we've had Richard on here, Richard Freeman, talking about what he and KB and these other teams have done to make it accessible for pro stock. And it's obviously still a huge investment and you can't take anything away from Camry Caruso, but it's a different environment. It's not just her. Lots of young people have come in with pretty instant success. Dallas Glenn, another one. Kyle Koretsky. Tons of names that you could throw into that hat. But when Erica started in 2004, I believe it was, right? I think that was her first year. It was a whole different ball game. If you came in without, and you weren't on KB or Warren Johnson or any of these other teams that were hot at that time, the Mopar deal, it was an uphill battle, man. But now it's so much more accessible. So that definitely is some of it. And I wonder too, what's her bucket list, or like what's on her list of accomplishments that she wants to get before she steps away. And she shared the stage this past weekend with Angèle Sampé, who is the winningest female racer in the history of all motorsports. But Erica, now after Angèle got another win and Erica got a win, but Erica's only 8 wins behind Angèle. I believe it's 46-38. That may have been pre-Norwalk, but there's still Erica's success in the last few years. We forget sometimes about Angèle's success in the 90s and 2000s and how she amassed all those wins. And we see her in the winner's circle occasionally now, like we did this past weekend. And Erica's recent success has put her within striking distance of that number. And I wonder if that is a number in her head.
It would take a hell of a run in 2022 to get it done, but I do think that it's possible.
No, maybe not all in 2020, but maybe that's what brings her back in 2023.
Maybe that is what brings her back, and I think it's a great point. Closing notes on this this bigger story debate. I will say based on the reaction we saw from Steve Torrence on the top end there in Norwalk, discussing his winless streak, unfortunately, I mean, it is a big story. No matter how you, I mean, it's a tough thing, and we always hate to talk about anything that could be, deemed negative. But at the same time, it is a storyline that exists in the sport, and we're all waiting to see him break through and return to form or get back. And it's not like they're doing anything wrong. They've got a fast race car. They're doing a great job. They're just losing some drag races, man. And it really probably speaks to how competitive Top Fuel is in 2022. 14 different finalists this year. It seems like, I mean, that seems like a lot. We have seen runs of dominance. Mike Salinas, 4 wins. Brittany Force, a couple of wins this year. I mean, there's been some strong teams, but man, they're all so good. But I will say, like I said, closing notes, I do think it's starting to get to Steve a little bit. I think that there's some frustration that we're seeing. I saw a post on social media this week that he made. Please ask me one more time when we're going to win. And you can sense the frustration. And I got to be honest,
lot of spiciness.
Let it out,
Norwalk.
man.
Let it out.
Let us hear it, Steve. Let us hear it. Get mad. Let us hear it, because it's so good for the sport when these guys let some of their emotions show, man. You don't have to be polished and perfect all the time. I mean, and it's great to see these guys show a little bit of frustration. It's okay. You're a competitive athlete. You're a competitive professional athlete. You should be mad when things aren't going your way. You should be getting frustrated when you're used to winning and you're not. We need to see that. And when we can tell that you care, we care. So I'm hoping to see a little bit more sensitivity. I'm hoping to see a little bit more out of Steve Torrence in the coming weeks. Hopefully they turn this thing around. We saw a lot of sensitivity
in Norwalk. There was the deal with Cruz Petragon and Ron Capps on the starting line with Dean Antonelli at the end of they turned and interviewed him after the run, and he gave us some sound bites there about what he thought about Cruz taking his time to stage. And same thing with Matt Hartford and Erica as far as the elite Cruz take on Matt's staging procedure. Both were within the legal confines of the rules, but there were definitely some exceptions taken to those. And we're getting to the point of the season where we're going into the Western Swing. The countdown is approaching, Indy's approaching. And it's like a lot of these teams that are winless or that are trying to knock Erica off her throne right now are, hey, we got to buckle up. We got to get this going. We don't have a lot of races left that we can have this dominance continue or continue to lose rounds to this person or go winless or whatever the case may be.
You're 100% right, man. And I actually don't have this drawn up as a question for the day, but I do think that the heat of summer, these dog days of summer, they start to get to everybody. And we're kind of at the end of everybody's out of their early season optimism. Mm-hmm. Nobody's looking on the bright side anymore, right? Everybody, we're starting to burn into budgets. Gas is diesel $6 a gallon. And I think we're starting to see some frustrations boil over. I mean, these staging situations. And I don't think those things are criminal offenses, man. I don't know that
they're good. They're good for the sport, man. They're good for the sport. And even though those teams may be mad in those moments or whatever, and I get it, you feel like a target's on your back, but if the shoe's on the other foot, you're probably doing the same thing. And that's drag racing, taking advantage of what you may know someone's tendencies to be, or anything you can do to try to gain an advantage as a driver. If you're behind the 8 ball on performance, you got to do it. If we're not doing that, then let's just race remote control cars.
Yeah, we should quit. I mean, to be honest, in all fairness, if Matt Hartford didn't roll up against Erica and try something, I mean, I may have considered like lobbing a burrito at her windshield, like the Anchorman movie. You know what I mean? Do something.
That's because what we did, man. Back in the day, I mean, we, racing with my dad, we always had a strategy going up every run if what we were going to do, and they had a strategy against us. They knew our tendencies.
Yeah, and Charles Carpenter wants to stage last.
Yeah,
and I mean, we've seen a lot of guys try to upset the apple cart, right? But we saw Ricky Smith did it to your dad all the time. Yep. There was a lot of people that would try to make Charles stage first, and he just wasn't going to do it, right? I mean, we've seen those guys get backed out of the beams, and I think that's what makes our sport great. If we lose that mano-a-mano, one-on-one competition aspect, Like, it's funny because if you look at stick and ball sports, I thought about this over the weekend. There's always, like, we're talking about NBA basketball, which is a team sport, but it almost always becomes, the debate becomes Michael Jordan, LeBron James, one-on-one. Who wins? Our sport's always one-on-one. Like, we have so many, it's so good. We have constant one-on-one competition.
It's a team sport in the pits and in the preparation of the car and in all the other aspects. But once that burnout's done and you backed up and the door's closed, you push that little button, if it's on a pro stock car, on the window, and you roll up. That is the true moment between there and the finish line, that it is one-on-one.
One-on-one,
so
man.
we got to see as much of that as possible.
We need to lean into that instead of trying to punish people or make bad guys out of anybody that's willing to play the game, and especially when you're covered performance-wise. Sometimes that mental edge or getting in someone's head, that's the only opportunity. That's all you got, especially when you're in a class like NHRA Pro Stock, which is massively regulated, right? Very narrow confines, gasoline burning, 500-inch manually. I mean, everybody's got basically the same equipment. And if somebody else is making better runs than you got to find a way to narrow the gap somehow, some way. And sometimes it's, a little trickery on the starting line, and I'm all for it, man. Hey, before we dive into the next of our many topics here on today's episode of the West Buck Show, I want to remind you guys that each and every episode is made possible by way of our friends at Stroud Safety. Stroud Safety is known for their top quality racing safety equipment, from drag chutes and seatbelts to fire suits, gloves, and blankets, all 100% made in America. Log on to stroudsafety.com and make sure you tell them we sent you. Mike, we definitely have a lot more to cover here, and I'm glad you brought up the tempers flaring, because I'm hoping that we get to see a little bit more of that here in 2022 before it's all said and done. Speaking of tempers flaring, there was big news over the weekend. He wasn't able to seal the deal, but Stevie Jackson set the door slammer world abuzz over the course of the weekend, first announcing his switch from a root-style blower to a screw-type supercharger, newly allowed in 2022, and then by absolutely crushing the field with a painfully impressive 5.701 second, 257.63 miles per hour performance to snag the number one qualifying spot, besting the rest of the field by 0.04 of a second and maintaining top speed of the event by something like 5 miles an hour, man. What's your take on this? Big deal, little deal, no deal, screw blower first? I mean, we've seen this story before. A new combination shows up in NHRA Pro Mod, and the next thing you know, they're number one qualifier.
Well, man, I think time will tell. I think we have yet to see whether this is a big deal or no deal. Stevie didn't win the race. Part failure, an airline caused him, I guess, not to go into high gear against Ricky Smith. Ricky went on to race Chris Thorne. And what can you say about Chris Thorne?
Oh my gosh.
This season? I mean, we could do a whole show on that, but we'll see what NHRA does, and we'll see what Stevie does for the rest of the year. Was this a strategy? Was this a rules strategy by Stevie to show what the screw blowers are capable of, and then get a rule change put on those cars, and then go back to a different combination? We've heard Ricky Smith in the past kind of threaten that the turbos are sandbagging or whatever the case was. He was going to get a turbo and show him what can actually be done, and then go back, but have his nitrous car in the trailer. I kind of wonder, with someone like Stevie who has all these combinations at his disposal and has experience with all of them, what he ends up doing and kind of what his end game is. Because he's got something turning at all times. He's got a plan. He's got something that he's scheming on, and we'll see what actually happens. And I wonder how much that performance caught the eye of NHRA after everyone under the sun. A lot of smart drivers, a lot of big names, smart people. We've had a couple people on this show say it, and Stevie himself even admitted that he was wrong about the screw blower rules and that they're more competitive than what he initially thought.
I talked to a dozen, I mean, no exaggeration, Mike. I talked to a dozen different tuners, drivers. When the news of the screw blower being allowed in NHRA Pro Mod, which is something that I have been adamantly opposed to. I still today am opposed to it. For the most part.
You have a t-shirt worthy quote about
wherever screw blowers go, they ruin everything. And and I have multiple concerns. I got a handful of points to make, but like as soon as the news broke that the NHRA was going to allow screw blowers, I had a couple of questions. Like first was, what is the goal of this? I mean, is this about participation? Because I'm not sure that this is the answer. I mean, there's not a tremendous inventory of screw blower cars around the country. There are some, and it's a growing number right now for damn sure. But go back to January or February or whatever before the season started, it wasn't like that. I mean, there was cars that were racing in PDRA, cars that were racing in Northeast Outlaw Pro Mods, cars that were racing in NMCA, cars that were racing in the Midwest Drag Racing Series. But none of those cars, to me, I mean, I talk to a lot of these drivers quite frequently, and I never heard from any of them that like, hey man, I'm really hoping that NHRA lets screw blowers in so I can go run that series. Yeah. Most of the racers that I talked to, they were all very happy where they're at. I mean, you go poll the pits at a PDRA race, you go poll the pits at a Midwest Drag Racing Series race, NMCA, on down the list. These guys are really thriving in those regional series, and they're completely content with it, right? They don't have maybe to pop in one or two. So like I said, my first question was, what are we trying to accomplish with this? Secondly, will this work? Can these cars run? Be competitive? So I started ringing phones, and I'm talking about high-level guys all telling me the best that combination can run is 585.
Yeah,
the best,
I heard 580s.
Mid 580s is the best combination that combination can run. A 2,700 pound overdrive limited.
And supposedly some guys tested with it over the winter, and maybe just too few runs or whatever, weren't happy with it and said, "No, this ain't gonna work."
From what I understand, I mean, there's a bunch of things to talk about with this, because really, we were just talking here a couple of weeks ago. We had him on the show, Stan Shelton, having a really, really great start to his drag racing career. A guy who's, spent a tremendous amount of time and still active in the truck and tractor pulling world, comes out and is kind of proven, starting at the NHRA 4-wide Nationals in Charlotte, that this screw blower combination's the real deal. And that's an operation that's got Steve Petty involved, all the brain trust at Proline Racing Engines, Fuel Tech. I mean, there's a lot of smart people involved in that program. And I understand that, the variables are constantly changing. But if we just look at the numbers, if you look at Stan Shelton's performance with the Screw Charge Pro Mod car and Stevie Jackson's performance with a Screw Charge Pro Mod car this past weekend in Norwalk, they're not even on the same planet. Dude, I mean, Stevie went 570 with a 1 along at 257 alongside Stan, who went 584.0 at 249. Next time in the third qualifying session, Stevie went 74 at 257 and change. Stan went 83 at 249. I mean, I can't help but wonder. I mean, it begs the question, is Stan Shelton's car capable of matching that performance? I mean, I have to believe it is. I mean, I would think so. I have to believe it is. So,
and we'll see if Stan's car goes out there and picks up next race. What the proof will be in the pudding in that situation. That is eye opening when you see the distance, the
disparity,
Stevie's runs and Stan's. And to me, it comes down to what does this do now? Was this a move by NHRA to increase accessibility? Because the screw blower combination is a pretty accessible.
The screw blowers are harder to get right now than they've perhaps ever been.
As far as outside of supply chain or right. Getting them, but to get it up and running, it's a common combination, and it's not kind of behind a gated situation like what you may have with the Roots blower, where you got to go through one of the top guys to get the badass stuff. Correct. Or you're going to be just out in left field. And it's an accessible, more affordable combination than some of these other like Nitrous, or even Pro Charger. Sure. And was that the goal? And will we see that pay off? Maybe that was the ultimate goal for NHRA, to try to increase participation by increasing accessibility. I don't know what the other motivation could be, but it's going to be very interesting to see if we see any more screw blown converts come out there, or if we continue to see it really just be Stan Shelton, depending on what Stevie does.
I venture to say we see Stevie stick this out, unless a massive there is no way that you run like that in those conditions.
Be hard to do.
There's no way that they, in my mind, if a rule change comes this week or next or before the next stop on the NHRA tour that
will be the
significantly hinders the screw blower combo, then yeah, I think you see Stevie revert back to the Roots style blower, Chuck Ford horsepower, CFH, a Chuck Ford blower, and I think he'll switch back to that. However, if nothing changes and the NHRA decides, and they are all over the map with this stuff. Ricky Smith goes 250 with a nitrous car, and they're hanging weight on him by daybreak, right? But there have been other instances where the Pro Charger cars have what appears to be multiple 500s on the field, and they just let them run with it for a while, right? To kind of let things, I don't know, sort themselves out, if you will. So there's no telling what the hell the NHRA is going to do. There's no telling.
And maybe they think they've got to get more data. So maybe there's another race or two left in this for Stevie to, continue with that dominating performance and try to move up the ladder and move up in points. It's the rule change. I'm waiting to see what happens with that, if there is one. We haven't heard anything. I don't think we've talked to anybody or gotten any confirmation one way or another. But to me, the other interesting aspect is, do we see any other racers from other combinations switch to the screw blower?
Hell yes,
specifically Pro Charge combinations.
We're going to see I'm telling you right now, if there isn't a significant rule change very soon, we're going to see a mass exodus. And I may eat my words, and I will happily do so. But I will tell you right here and right now, if something isn't done very soon, they'll all be screw blowers. We will have top alcohol funny car with doors.
And isn't that funny, man? Because a few years ago, it was all turbo, right? And then everybody made a mass exodus to Pro Charger. But they made a rule change on Pro Charger and really made it so you've got to run those things on the ragged edge.
At or near
that's the way
self-destruction.
Right. But that's where nitrous cars are running. And
that's the problem.
If you ask Lyle Barnett, that's where they're running that turbo car. But now here we've got a screw blown combination. These screw blowers make so much horsepower that they're running this thing at a low percentage of what it's capable of.
And forever, and I don't know if this is, I don't know that we necessarily invented this phrase, but whichever combination is the furthest away from its mechanical limitations has the advantage. And it is without question that nitrous engines are on the ragged edge. We see
probably
these
the most.
Roots,
they are always at their mechanical limit.
Always.
Really, the field is set, if you think about it, by what the nitrous cars are capable of. Because these Pro Charge turbo and screw blower and Roots blower they've got all the weight hung on them. They've got low overdrive, all the gear ratio rules, everything is
working
predicated off of what the nitrous cars are capable of running. And I don't mean that as any slight to nitrous.
It just is what it is,
the wool
man.
nitrous, but that's what it is. That sets the bar, and then all the other combinations have to be brought into check to make the nitrous, or to keep the nitrous combination viable. And even then, we only have one or two guys out there with a nitrous combination, Ricky, who is successful with it. But beyond that, there's really no one else. Everyone else has either gone to a different combination or left the class altogether. So
it's a really dynamic situation because
mechanical limit.
They are. I agree with that, and I believe that the Roots blown combination is at its mechanical limit or near
with the current rules.
With the current rules, I believe that the turbo combination is at or near or close. Right? I mean, obviously they're dealing with. This is one of the other things that has always thrown a wrench in the gears that kind of pissed me off. Is I don't like when an electronic device is the difference maker. Yes. The turbos that are on these 88 millimeter turbos that are on these NHRA Pro Mod cars can make make a lot more boost than they're limited to, probably double what they are limited to in competition via an electronic boost controller.
That's my point about those combinations versus boosted combinations versus the naturally aspirated nitrous combination, which is the big difference between the two: forced induction versus natural aspiration. I mean, with fuel injection, but still you're dependent on the outside air. There's no forced induction. So that is, to me, what makes all the difference is the fact that you can just make a quick rule change. And I know I'm going to get heat from blower guys and all the other combinations, but with a couple reasonable rule changes, you can gain a ton of horsepower out of one of those cars.
No question, man.
They're running at such a low percentage of what they're capable of. You can't just tell the nitrous cars to go add more horsepower.
No, there's no way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I, from what I understand, talking to guys like, Sonny Leonard before his passing, and Pat Musey and David Rear, these things, the days of like getting out the jet kit, they're over.
No,
you know what I mean?
These guys don't change jets. They change jets like twice a year, right?
Which
everything else is controlled with.
And hell, you try to change jets in the staging lanes.
Oh yeah,
right?
Bring the jet box with you. Bring the clutch kit and the jet box.
Right. I mean, and those days are gone, which very much speaks to how far that combination has come. But it's very similar to like Pro Stock. It is what it is, right? Whereas the screw blower deal, I'm telling you, and I mean it when I say it, everywhere that deal goes, it destroys everything. And it stinks because it's not that I'm not a fan of it, like mechanically. Like I have no problem with it on a funny
They're
car.
badass, man.
Yeah, they are badass. And I have no problem with them on an outlaw pro mod car, right? It makes sense. It's outlaw. But when you're racing NHRA legal quarter mile pro mod, it's so advantageous. I don't see any way that everybody's not running one. I mean, everybody, man. I mean,
but why didn't we see that? There's so many smart guys with the screw blower combination that
it's that classic case of no one's had to try it.
I guess so.
So no one knew.
I just can't believe the blowback on the rule set initially when it was announced. Like it was an absolute joke.
People were laughing at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about it taking over the class.
But I just think it's one of those things, and we're all guilty of this, of like preconceived notions. We've operated within these parameters for our whole career, and we're just can't hardly imagine that anything outside of those parameters could be successful. Because if it were, surely we'd have figured it out by now. But we never had a reason to. We've never had a reason to test with those, with a high gear in the car. We've never had to, run one of those cars at 2,700 pounds. That's another thing. Most of the screw blower door slammer stuff, that's all outlaw 8th mile lightweight for the most part. I mean, it's just total, we're way out. I think
the rear gear is what had most people thrown off.
If I
had to guess, because that's the big, and that is a good point that you're making, is that specific rule set and these specific changes that need to be made to the car. If you had a screw blown combination, are what kept people from trying.
My question is, did NHRA know that it would run this well? Like, did they? I mean, you got to give some credit to like Lonnie Grimm. Did he know that it was capable of running bottom 70s? I bet he does. I bet he did.
Talk to Lonnie. I talked to Lonnie and asked him at Charlotte a little bit about what went behind the thinking of this rule change, and he believed that it would be competitive. He just was waiting for people to take him up on it.
Well, and they certainly have, and I think we're going to see a lot of it. By all accounts, I mean, with my ear to the ground the last couple of days, I'm hearing a lot of PDRA centrifugal supercharged teams are ordering screw blowers.
That's another thing we need to talk about. You mentioned PDRA earlier. And that's a situation where we've got multiple combinations in one class.
You know what we should change this to is, I mean, for me, I'm going to tell you this. It's a big deal. This is a big deal. And this situation, in my opinion, will have lasting ramifications. It's this particular situation. If you table like the money that's coming into the class and some of the new sponsorship, there's a lot of positive news, a lot of good news, no doubt. But this particular situation, whether or not, I mean, we've been fearful of everybody going to the same combination for a long time. Well, that door is wide open right now. Never been wider open than it is in this moment. I truly believe it. And I'm genuinely concerned that at some point in the future, we're going to see 14, 15, 16 screw-blown Camaros showing up for NHRA Pro Mod races. And maybe that's not the end of the world, and maybe it doesn't last forever. But this is to your point, a rinse and repeat. This is a readily available product with off-the-shelf parts. Nobody's having to buy. This is stuff that you can get and put in a car and be successful relatively quickly. And I'm telling you what, maybe our caption should read big deal or big business, because I see this as a business move more so than anything else, not by NHRA, but by engine builders like Proline Racing Engines. There's no doubt in my mind they're seeing this as the next sellable combination. They kind of made their mark on the sport of drag racing as the twin turbo automatic guys. They'll put a twin turbo Hemi in your stuff. Before that, a 481X, they'll put a twin turbo 481X in your stuff. They'll put a 400 turbo behind it with a converter, and they'll put you in the winner's circle, right? Over time, that combination became more and more beat up by rules, beat up with weight. So they had to pivot. Plus, twin turbo cars are notoriously hard to manage, notoriously hard to race. So they looked for an opportunity to pivot. They pivoted to the to the Pro Charger combination, and that became the go-to. You see Proline fielding that combination in everything from Pro 275 to Pro Mod, right? All their teams started to move that direction. The next thing is the screw blower. I think this is something that will kind of continue. There's in my opinion, and I don't know this for fact, but looking at it from afar, this is scalability. What is something that we can scale? What is something that's reliable, that's readily available, that is low maintenance? I mean, that's one of the things you hear about guys with screw blowers, like guys that are running the same, obviously there's some expense to it. You got to send it back to be recertified. I'm not saying it's pain-free, but it is a very reliable horsepower manufacturer. I mean, it's like bolting a small block Chevy on top of anything. I mean, it's a really impressive thing. I mean, it's crazy the power they can make with those things relatively effortlessly. And don't get me wrong, we'll see the Stevie Jacksons and the Stan Shelton. We'll see all these guys shorten the fuse, and we'll see them find the edge. That's what they do. But man, I think we're a long way away from it. I really do.
We're definitely a long way away from it with the rule set, because it's again, mechanical limitation. The fact that the screw blower is so far from its mechanical limitation is the scary part about it. And when I looked at the rules initially, that's the first thing I thought is, oh my gosh, they got this thing, handcuffed or whatever. But that only shows what it's capable of by the fact that they have to knock it down that far. And here we go, got Stevie Jackson and his whole team, arguably. I mean, would you say that in modern drag racing, Stevie has more screw blower experience and tuning experience, and his team does, as anyone in Pro Mod and in drag radio?
Yeah. I mean, the only guy that I think is close is Todd Tutterow, Jason Scruggs.
Frankie Taylor.
Jason Scruggs. Jason Scruggs, if Jason Scruggs will be a hitter.
Supposedly Scruggs tested with the screw blown combination earlier in the year. And
the issue is that all those guys have run them at 120 over versus 75 over that they're mandated by NHRA, and they've run them as light as they could probably get their cars, certainly under 2,500, 2,400-ish pounds. So to be at 2,700 pounds with 75% overdrive and a 410 rear gear, I think is what it is. I just think that there's a long way for that combination to go, and we just saw the beginning of it.
Yeah, Scruggs is definitely one of the originators of obviously the outlaw door slammer deal with the screw blower. I'll never forget the first time I saw that car with that screw blower on it and like that little injector hat on a small block. I mean, it's like the biggest thing in the car was the screw blower. Looked like
bigger than Jason.
Like two bazookas, or how it's kind of got that double barrel look to it or whatever. And it's like, holy shit, man, we got to race against this thing.
I just don't want to see Pro Mod become top alcohol funny car, because I think it can be argued like, hey man, if we're just going to run screw blown Hemis, like maybe we should just run funny cars. I mean, are they safer? Probably. I mean, you know what I mean? And you know what I mean? I don't want to do that because I don't like funny cars as much as I like Pro Mods. I want cars that look like cars still, and I want swinging doors, and I want the driver where he's supposed to be on the left-hand side of the car. But I don't know. It's a big conversation that's going to have lasting ramifications. There's no doubt about it, man. And there are positives. I mean, there will be teams that are able to be competitive that wouldn't be otherwise because they weren't on an Al Billis blower program. They weren't on a Mike Janis blower program. They weren't on a Chuck Ford blower program. I mean, those things are limited. There's some upsides to it. I think it's going to make, because it can also be argued accessibility.
Like I said earlier, I think that may bring some people in off the fence. I think it's crazy that we started the season like this is a joke, like almost put it out of our mind. Didn't even think about it. Then Stan comes out to Charlotte and you're like, wait a minute, might be something to this. Then now look at what we're talking about. And look at Stevie's performance this past weekend. And now what are we going to be talking about for the rest of the season? Like this is like something that has snuck up on everybody, I feel like.
Oh, it has snuck up on everybody. The question will be how many people saw what happened this weekend that are Midwest drag racing series competitors that are PDRA Pro Boost competitors. I mean, look at how well Kurt Stedding and Todd Tutterow are running right now in PDRA Pro Boost. I mean, if I'm those guys, I'm thinking about hitting up one or two, St. Louis or one of the, Dallas down here to end the season. I mean, maybe not the only, but maybe one of the upsides, maybe some of the silver lining to this whole situation is maybe there's some guys that are racing that want to compete full-time in other sanctions and series that will dive into competition when it makes sense regionally, when it's in the area, when the NHRA, the big show comes to town, maybe they'll dive in because they've got a car that's not too terribly far away from being legal. So maybe
that probably was some of the NHRA thinking as well.
But they needed Stevie to do what Stevie did in order to entice these other people. Because there's a whole lot of guys probably around the country right now going, I got the same stuff he's got. You know what I mean? I got the same blower. We could put some weight. I mean, right? I mean, and now granted, if Stevie can do it, doesn't mean that everybody can do it. We've seen that.
There's a lot more to it than that.
There's a lot more to it than that. But I do think that it's got to at least put that. Some people are thinking about it. Some people are talking about it that otherwise would not be, in my opinion.
And I wonder what it's going to do in PDRA Pro Boost as well. Are we going to see, like you said, Tutterow, Stedding, and the way those cars are running over there? You've got Johnny Camp he's running well.
Randy Weatherford. There's a slew of them that are having.
Melanie's running with the Roots combination right there with the screw combination. That's a really cool deal. The fact that all those combinations are running together. But when we start to see more of the screw blower stuff, and again, the mechanical limitations, how close to the edge is Melanie and John Salemi running that car, or John Camp and Brandon Stroud and that tuning brain trust over there. How close are they to the ragged edge versus what maybe Tutterow or Stedding are at? I don't know. And is it the same on 1/8 mile versus 1/4 mile?
I would say no. However, we've seen some failures. Like, I mean, when you start to race at this level, I mean, everybody is really sensitive to this stuff, but I do think we have to at some point accept the fact, much like major league sports, people are going to get hurt. Right? We don't stop playing. We don't stop talking about it. We don't ever, and in this game, parts are going to fail, stuff's going to break or whatever. And we've seen, we saw, I believe it was Johnny Camp pop a blower in qualifying or in qualifying during the PDRA and North versus South shootout this past weekend in Maryland. So, I mean, I guess if a guy is sitting back going, I can probably buy one of these screw blowers and run it for the next 16 years.
I was about to say 15 to 20.
Right? You know what I mean?
Is what you get out of those things.
It's a really interesting conversation, and I appreciate you having it with me, Mike. Guys, real quick, I do want to.
We'll look forward to the blowback on that.
There will be some, I promise. Let me take a minute to remind you all that the Wes Buck Show is brought to you by our friends at Redline Synthetic Oils. Redline has a reputation with racers and hardcore enthusiasts for creating products that perform and protect better than any other on the market, and they've been doing it since 1979. Whether it's your race car, your tow rig, your motorcycle, or your lawnmower, when you think about lubricants, you need to think about our friends at Redline. For more information, log on to Redline Oil. I just topped off the old ZL1 with several quarts of Redline this past weekend. Shout out to my friends over there. Mike, we've got a lot more to cover here. Let me bring you back onto the broadcast. This is where we've got to touch on a little bit of bad news. Mike, I'm going to ask you to do this with me. It's been a rough go of it in recent weeks, guys. We've lost innumerable legends of our sport, and the hits keep on coming. This past week, we lost two of them. Two icons, especially in terms of track operation and race promotion. Bruton Smith of Speedway Motorsports, namely ZMAX Dragway, perhaps one of Las Vegas Motor Speedway, Sonoma. His contribution, Bristol, his contribution to drag racing to motorsports is hard to even put into words. And of course, just a few days ago, the sudden passing of Bill Bader Sr., longtime owner operator of Summit Motorsports Park, originally Norwalk Raceway Park in Ohio. Crazy to think of something like that happening on the very weekend that the NHRA rolled into town for their national event.
Within a couple of hours, basically at about the same time the finals were being run.
Such a tough moment. I got a couple of graphics I'd like to show up here. Bruton Smith, 95 years young, 1927 to 2002. We'll be thinking about his friends and family, and just forever in awe of what he's done for the sport of drag racing, building 2 4-wide drag strips, reviving a notion that I think had left everyone's mind. Nobody was thinking about 4-wide drag racing. And Bill Bader, his commitment to customer service, his commitment to entertaining, 1943 to 2002, we confirmed earlier this week that he was 79 years old when we lost him. His son, Bill Bader Jr., still making a massive contribution to the sport of drag racing right now. Mike, I mean, what can you say about these guys that hasn't been said already? I mean, it all feels like fluff at this point, but these guys made all the difference in the world. Our sport would not be where it is today without them.
Absolutely. Two innovators and people that cared about the sport and cared about seeing it go to another level. I feel that way, especially here in Charlotte, in the Charlotte area. Bruton Smith's impact. Bruton Smith Boulevard is the road that you get off the interstate to go to ZMAX Dragway, and that whole area really, it was built by Bruton. Associating, we a lot of times, especially in drag racing, we don't like to be associated with NASCAR, and we don't like talking about or comparing NASCAR. But Bruton's influence and what he did for NASCAR, especially here in the Charlotte area, then carried over to drag racing when he built ZMAX Dragway, and it had already by Las Vegas, Bristol, the other places he had. The sort of marrying those two, it's a high tide lifts all boats type of situation. Being lumped in with Bruton Smith, with Speedway,
we were guilty by
Motorsports,
association. It was a fantastic
and the success of NASCAR helped drag racing. And building a facility like ZMAX Dragway, I mean, every time I go there, I'm still just blown away by that facility, and that this is a drag strip, that this is what Bruton envisioned for the sport. The same thing can be said for Bill Bader when you go there. Obviously much something they built over time and grew over time, but huge stadium seating, tower, the midway with the merchandise and the ice cream, and like you said, the customer service employees dressed in white pants and American flag shirts or whatever those were, and just everything. When you went there, you felt like you were a part of something special, and you were going to be treated well. And I think that same thing happens at all the Speedway Motorsports tracks.
I couldn't agree more, man. I got the opportunity to actually talk to Bruton Smith and interview him for a cover story of Drag Illustrated magazine, one of my favorite covers back in the spring of 2012. And I remember there was so much. I mean, it was like just getting him on the phone was kind of as overwhelming and awe-inspiring as walking into the tower at ZMAX Dragway. I mean, there was a whole series of events and scheduling that had to happen, and calling a certain number at a certain time, and all these arrangements. There were certain photos that they wanted used. I mean, the attention to detail, even in that, an interview with some random guy, drag racing guy, there was an effort or a level of attention to detail that I don't know that I've ever experienced, and maybe haven't experienced to this day
in the big time sports and in NASCAR. And we experienced some of that working with Tony Stewart and Leah to do the cover. And even since then, like Tony's press conference and some of the stuff, the way they do stuff in drag racing, we tend to go, I'm not going through all that, or just put me on the phone with them. Whatever. Everything is so casual and just directly to the point. Sometimes that pop and circumstance and going through those channels and all that stuff. I mean, just like the story you're telling, that's what it's all about, and that's what builds the mystique of a Bruton Smith.
I had to pitch the concept. I mean, it was a much different thing. Whenever I ring up most people, or we reach out to someone to do a story on them or whatever, it's like, yeah, man. I mean, they had to like kind of think about it. And like, well, what kind of story are you trying to tell? Like, what are the questions going to be? What's the direction of this? And I'm going, well, shit, I hadn't even thought about it yet.
No one's asked me that.
Nobody's asked me that. I just wanted to get him on the phone, shoot the breeze a little bit. And they're like, well, we just love to know a little bit more about the direction of this and what we're trying to accomplish. And it went off without a hitch, man. That was a guy, there was all of that, the pomp and circumstance, and there was layers to it, and there was a gatekeeper. I remember all of that. But there was also the fact that this dude was so generous with his time, Mike. Like there was no rush. I continued, I'm bad about this still today, but I kept apologizing for like keeping him. You're like, I'm sorry, I just got a couple more things I wanted to go over. And he's like, hey, buddy, it's all good, and I mean, it's like, I don't think he said it's all good, but but he was so gracious, so generous with his time. He was even like, hey, just hit me back, if we need to, anything else we need to cover. And I also appreciated his willingness to like step outside the box. The 4 wides deal is an example, but I don't think it's really it's not enough of an example to really demonstrate how far away from tradition Bruton Smith was willing to go. I remember him telling me that he wanted to see the disparity between finishing first in NASCAR and finishing second in NASCAR be much more severe. I don't remember the exact numbers, but if it pays $1 million to win a NASCAR race, he felt it should pay like $50 to get second place, because that's what's going to create action. And just hearing him talk about those things and have an appreciation for that, and have an appreciation that obviously we want to be safe, and obviously we want great competition and all this stuff, but I also got to put on a great show, and I have to do the things necessary to make the show great. And he's wanting to change the payout structure. I mean, imagine what that would do like in the NHRA world. Stevie Jackson, I hate to keep bringing him up, but I remember when I interviewed Stevie for the cover of Drag Illustrated 100 years ago, one of the things he told me that I found very interesting was comparing NHRA drag racing or PDRA drag racing or whatever he was doing at the time. I think he was actually the star of the radial tire movement at that time when we first put him on the cover. Yep. He told me, I can't begin to tell you how different it is racing for money that you may or may not win versus money that's yours. Like when he goes up and grudge races, he may have to take 10 grand out of his pocket or 50 grand out of his pocket and pay that guy.
I remember that passage in that story.
It's such a different thing. If Ron Capps loses, Steve Torrence didn't have to pay anybody any money, right? Josh Hart didn't have to stroke a check to Mike Salinas Sunday afternoon because he lost. It was just money he didn't win. Instead of winning 40 or 50 grand, he won 10 or whatever. Right. And it's such a different deal. And I loved that I shared that story with Bruton, and he goes, exactly. We need to create that type of atmosphere anytime we can, and it's not that we don't want
an atmosphere for fans too.
Yes.
That's like part of the show is creating a facility that you can take your wife and kids to and know the bathrooms are going to be, usable and clean, and that there's going to be plenty of parking, and that there's, the food's going to be, there's going to be concession
there's going to be someone pick you up
corner.
on a golf cart if it's a long walk. Like, no, I'm telling you, man, that's the thing. And that continues to Bill Bader. I'll tell you, I got a little Bill Bader story here. Brian Epps, longtime, very well-known and beloved drag racing photographer, posted on his Facebook page a letter that Bill Bader Sr. had sent to him. And there's a paragraph in here that I thought was really, really, really powerful. And he said, he's telling him about what photos he wants in the coming years. And he says, I do know I want personality and people pictures more than I want cars and track shots. We are a people business, not about machines and metal. Families, fellowship, and emotions are the future of IHRA. This is when he was the president of the IHRA. And it's like, man, you are talking to my soul with those words.
That's Drag Illustrated.
That it is. I mean, and I don't know that I recognized how much we share that belief, but I couldn't agree more. I 100 million% believe that the people are what make the difference. The people are what make this sport great. And his dedication to that, obviously sending these letters out to photographers. I mean, I don't think people even know that those conversations happen, but I have them weekly. I get on the phone with a photographer, a new one. And the first thing I ask them is like, hey, I'm going to get 100 shots this weekend of a great burnout and great wheel stand and the crash. And I know that you want a front row seat to the action, but I really need you shooting photos in the pits. I really need you shooting photos of wives strapping drivers into their cars. I need human faces. I want to tell stories. And I'm going to have a billion options when it comes to a burnout shot or a launch shot. There's so many of those. I need photos of people. And I didn't even know how much he shared. We shared that approach, man.
Bill Bader and the whole Bader family, Bill was a people person, and that's what he was about. And always had a smile on his face. Would greet you when you came in. I remember pulling through there for an ADRL race in the late 2000s.
Late 2000s, yeah.
Which I think we won actually,
you did.
And so did
your guy.
David Janes. And there he is. He's greeting everybody that's coming through the gate. And John Asher pinned a tribute to him that's on Competition Plus, and the title of it is Bill Bader, the guy that made it cool to be kind. And I think that really sums
gave me
up
goosebumps, man.
what he was all about, what the Bader family are all about. He wasn't, trying to nickel and dime you. He wasn't trying to get this race over with. He wasn't trying to figure out a way to improve his business. It was all about treating people the right way. And that, we talked about it this morning on our conference call, but that is becoming a less common thing as corporations take over, as bottom line becomes the top of everyone's concerns. What's right and what brings people back, what puts on a good show, what makes people feel good. Those things, unfortunately, are always the first things that get cut when the bottom line is what you're looking at. And I don't think the Bader family, they've done well with the track, but they could have done. There's so many ways.
Selling a pound of ice cream for $1. You can't be.
Right,
you're taking an L. But you're doing it in the name of providing an incredible, memorable customer experience. And in this day and age, man, customer experience matters. I'm not saying everybody, but we're in an age of like concierge neighborhoods. People want things delivered same day, right? They want an air-conditioned suite. They want someone. I went to see the Elvis movie, which I don't mean to get off track, but it is the greatest movie that has ever been made. Ever.
You're the only person that went and saw Elvis before they saw Top Gun Maverick.
Well, listen to me. That is the greatest. My hips are starting to itch and my legs start. I'm getting wound up. I'm getting all shook up just talking about it.
Almost uncomfortable affection for Elvis.
I really do. He is my hero, and that movie changed my life again. Just like pretty much, it's unbelievable. But I don't even know what point I was going to make. What were you talking about?
I don't know.
Oh, well, the point I was going to make ultimately.
Going to the movie theater.
Oh, going to the movie theater. Service. Oh, yeah. They bring your popcorn to you now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, bro. I mean, like, you just put it on your app and they bring you your drinks and your popcorn. And it's like,
it's because you live in bougie Fort Worth.
Well, we do live in a bougie Fort Worth, but that's happening, right? And I'm just saying that, like,
for sure.
When I go to these drag strips and it's like the bathroom is a shanty with like a light bulb hanging and a little cord to like turn the light on. And I'm not trying to bag on anybody, but man, if we wonder sometimes what's wrong or why things aren't going our direction or why we can't get the crowd that they get or why we don't have the success that they get, they go about it different, man. And I tip my cap to Bill Bader Sr. and Bill Bader Jr. kind of in closing here, and Bruton Smith and Speedway Motorsports and Marcus, everybody that's been involved in elevating the bar, raising the bar, creating really a roadmap for success. And it really does. It starts with customer service. It starts with being nice. I can't wait to read this article that you said John Asher penned on Comp Plus. I'm going to pull that up as soon as we go off the air because I'm a big believer in treating people right, man, and being nice. I teach it to my kids. Like, you can go a long, long way in life just being friendly and being nice to people, and it's
not always the easiest path. A lot of times that's the hardest path. But these two guys definitely showed that, and taking care of people, taking care of how many people are employed by these companies too, especially Bruton's companies.
It's unbelievable, man. I mean, you think about, they got 2 or 3 people like opening the doors for folks, pushing the button for you on the elevator in the tower. I mean, there's people everywhere.
Shout out to the media center door opener lady at ZMAX Dragway. I don't know her name, but she's been there every race for a decade. We got to get her name. We're going to get a picture of her in the fall and put her in the magazine.
We do, because they do it right, man. And lastly, we just want to send, on behalf of everyone at Drag Illustrated, obviously Mike and I, but our whole team at Drag Illustrated, we just want to send our heartfelt condolences to the families and friends. We are obviously mourning the loss of these 2 iconic figures, but nowhere near to the extent that their friends and family are. So we're thinking about you guys. And Mike, I guess we've got to move on down the line here. I'm going to dive in real quick with a script read and remind everybody that each and every episode of the Wes Buck Show is brought to you by FlowRacing.com. If you're a drag racer or a drag racing fan, you got to get on board with Flow Racing. The world leader in live sports streaming, Flow Racing provides unlimited access to drag racing's biggest events like Donald Long's Lights Out, No Mercy, and Sweet 16, every stop on the PDRA and NMCA tours, Funny Car Chaos, World Cup finals. streetcar super nationals, and much, much more. The platform provided by Flow Racing is 100% changing the sport of drag racing for the better, and there's no limit to the good they can do for our community. So log on to flowracing.com today and join the movement. Mike, what do we have next? We got some. I think we're going to start calling our shots a little bit.
Yeah,
here, right?
let's look forward here to the Western Swing. The Western Swing is my favorite stretch,
I think it is mine too,
of races in the NHRA. Since a kid, man, I loved watching it and just keeping up with. Is anyone going to sweep? That's the big story. Just
the additional storylines make all the difference, really. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about. But I mean, it's been since 2009 that anyone's got it done. Over 12 years since someone has swept the swing. In 2009, it was Antron Brown. Before him, interesting little stat here, in 2008, Tony Schumacher got it done. The very next year, Antron Brown got it done. Prior to them, Greg Anderson, we talked about this a little earlier in the show, in 2004, amidst one of the most dominant performances, dominant runs in the history of pro stock drag racing. He swept the swing in 2004. Larry Dixon did it in 2003. Corey Mack in 1997. John Force in 1994. Joe Amato in 1991. It's only been done by a funny car driver once. John Force back in 94, only done once by a pro stock driver, Anderson in 2004.
That's unreal. What do you attribute that to? I mean, that's a weird stat. What makes Top Fuel more likely to have a sweep?
I honestly think in some regards, there's been a more consistent cast of characters. You think about, like, there's just been a lot of
more
movement.
Dominant character. Like Tony Schumacher was unbeatable in 2008.
Yeah, and he won every race.
I don't know if what his season looked like that year, but I'm sure he was at the top of the heap.
I think we're due. I mean, that's my takeaway. Can the Western Swing be swept in 2022? The answer is yes. Yep. I think that we've got enough teams right now that have enough momentum. I mean, I'm looking at teams like Brittany Force, that a couple of wins this year. Grubby, a notoriously aggressive crew chief and tuner. I definitely think that they could be a threat. Mike Salinas, there's something magic happening
make your call
there
right now. Which in the pro classes that we'll just do. Pro stock, funny car, and Top Fuel. Who's your contender to sweep the swing in each of those classes?
Oh, each of those classes. Yep. Holy shit. So first and foremost, in pro stock, I think Erica Enders is. I really think it could happen, and I've got to be.
I think that is. I would be surprised if she doesn't sweep it.
I would be surprised if she doesn't sweep it too.
I am in that.
I almost would be more surprised if she doesn't sweep it than if she does. I think it's there for the taking. I think that they are massively dominant right now. I think that they've got a fast car. They've got some rhythm amongst them, and it's going to take. I mean, we saw it. I mean, she'd have 6 wins on the season if it wasn't for an engine failure, right? I mean, a couple of weeks ago in Bristol. So I think that she's got to be the favorite amongst all NHRA drivers to sweep the swing. She has to be the favorite to do the deal. I also think that she's got the career experience to pull it off because she's never crumbled under pressure. She's actually risen up. And I think that there are other drivers. I mean, Mike Salinas is probably who I would pick in Top Fuel.
That was my pick in Top Fuel too.
Okay. But let's be honest, if we're calling a spade here, Mike hasn't been in that situation.
It would be not unexpected based on his performance, but still a surprise if he got this
big surprise, right? Yeah. And he's never, that's uncharted waters. Like, he's in uncharted waters right now, having won 4 races in one season. This is completely new to him. So you put him in a situation where, say he wins the first 2 races and he's got an opportunity to sweep the swing. Will he be able to keep it all? He has his escalation as a driver, his performance. He is without a doubt the most improved driver of 2022. There's not even anyone remotely close to him, in my opinion, as far as someone who has come leaps and bounds from last season. But that's a really tough spot for a driver to be in if it's all on him and you're in the final round of the 3rd race of the Western Swing and it's all on you to make history and be the first person to sweep the swing in over a decade. I think 95% of the people, maybe 90% of the people in NHRA today, pro-level drivers, they're going to be shaking in their boots in that moment. I'm just being honest. But I think you put Erica Enders in that situation, she's right at home. And I'm obviously a fan or whatever, and I do think, but she's just done it. She's done it time and time again. When she
I don't
has to
think
be the
anyone
difference
would argue
maker.
that pick or that reasoning behind that pick. You can't argue.
Yeah,
otherwise.
there's no sort of favoritism. It's just
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is that she's been there. And I think that if you put her in a position, she's not only is she gonna she crumble, she will rise up. She's apt to to go 001 in the final at the third race of the swing, right? So she's definitely my pick.
Who's your funny car pick?
Man, I think I have to go with Robert Hight. I want to pick Ron Capps, but I think Ron could do it, but I think that you've got this new body that we're hearing everybody talking about, the variables and kind of getting used to running these new bodies. So no one's run that Toyota in Denver. No one's run that bad boy at 10,000 feet. So I can't imagine a scenario. I'm not saying it's impossible because you can't count any of these dudes out. I mean, you look at the crew, Coletta Motorsports, you look at Alexis DeJoria's team. I think that they're a tick away from where they want to be. And obviously Ron Capps and Dean Antonelli, I think that I don't think it's impossible, but I don't think it's likely. Whereas Robert Hight, I think that they just racked up a win. They're looking good. They've been
tons of experience at all of those tracks. Jimmy Prock. My pick is Matt Hagan. He's the only one with Hight that I think that has experience, has the continuity of his team, has the championship pedigree.
Here, let me throw this out at you. It's his home race. If you remember last year, we made a big, not his home race, but it's the Dodge's main race, right? It's the Power Broker Nationals, right? The Dodge has had a footprint on the NHRA Mile High Nationals for over 30 years now. Does that factor into this at all? Because it was a big deal last year when he won the race. Remember, we got the wheel wiggle, we got the camera slap, and we got the big. I think actually this is the anniversary. The Mile High Nationals will be the anniversary of what I believe to be kind of Matt Hagan getting put over. Like that was his come out party. He's obviously very successful prior to that moment, but as a superstar personality, that was when we first really got to see the Matt Hagan that I think we know and love today. So I guess I'm just curious, does it change your pick at all, knowing that he's going to be racing with the pressure of his sponsor on the property, and they're probably going to have dinners every night, and they're going to have functions all the time, and all these appearances and all these responsibilities? Does that change your opinion at all?
No.
Okay.
He's got enough experience and his team does, to weather that. And I actually think that he's the type of guy that brings out the best in him.
Agreed. I agree. I think that he's one of those dudes that probably need to be kept busy, right? Yeah. Like need to be kept busy, want to have a lot going on. And I think,
or he might end up at some kind of place getting a brand put on his chest or something.
True.
You
can't get too. We've probably slept on being branded, because if you can do that, I don't know what could happen else that isn't going to bother you. Like, right? I mean, if you can bite a belt and get branded, you're a man amongst boys. Let's be honest, right? I mean, you may be of questionable sanity, but you're definitely a tough guy. So I don't imagine he'll get rattled. So you've got you didn't give us a top fuel pick, so you've got Erica.
I did. Salinas was my.
Salinas was your pick as well. Okay, so we're kind of on the same page.
Back up. If I got to pick up someone else, I'd have to go with Brittany.
Very interesting. I think we need to have a separate conversation later this week, maybe do another episode or sometime in the near future. Is when will we see the Coletta Motorsports cars emerge at the level? I mean, it was huge news at the end of at the start of 2022 that Alan Johnson and Brian Houston were leaving Scrappers Racing, leaving Mike Salinas and joining Coletta Motorsports. Coletta Motorsports longtime tuner Rob Flynn would be leaving them and joining Scrapper. It was a little bit of a crew chief swap, and we've seen Mike Salinas have a career year. Rob Flynn has to be walking around with his chest puffed out and a little bit of pep in his step. I mean, holy cow, what an impression he's making, kind of reminding us all what he's capable of. I'm just anxious to see when we will see those Coletta cars do what we know they're capable of.
I think they're building their combination. That is a term that Steve Torrence used in his interview with Amanda Busick, was that, hey, we're out here, we're building our combination for the future. We're trying something different. They could have continued on the same path, but they think they're onto something, and they're working. They're going to see it through.
I don't mean to make it.
I think we're seeing that in Steve Torrence, and I think we're seeing that, or we will see that in the Coletta cars as the year goes on.
I tend to agree, man. So we gotta bang through these last ones pretty rapidly, real quick. Let's just touch on this. We were just talking about it. Are you at all surprised by the success we've seen from Mike Salinas? 4 Top Fuel wins in 2022, amidst what is inarguably the most competitive Top Fuel field we've seen in a long time. I mentioned a moment ago, 14 different finalists in 2022. Mike Salinas getting the job done 4 different times. Are you surprised by this?
I think I was at first at the start of the year, but seeing Mike in the interviews and hearing what he's saying and talking about the way he's improved his driving and his dedicated, I kind of feel like they've rededicated themselves, that team has rededicated itself to being at the top. And maybe he's got a little chip on his shoulder too, after the Alan Johnson deal. Like they've got something to prove that they can do it with this new team, with the new set of tuners. So initially, I was skeptical. I think skeptical would be the word. Could he keep it up? But we've seen that. And I mean, now he's in the catbird seat for the championship at this point, in my opinion.
I can't argue that take at all, to be honest with you. I think I was wondering as well, will he be able to sustain this over the long haul? We get into the dog days of summer. We get into, all these other things going on in the world. This is another one of these guys that is not a full-time drag racer. I mean, he's running companies, multiple businesses. He's a family man. He's married with children, and he's obviously trying to race and compete for a championship in Top Fuel. So you just started to wonder, like, when will all of that catch up? Will that get into his rhythm and mess with things? But clearly that is not the case. And again, I will make the argument right now that he is far and away the most improved driver in perhaps all of drag racing, most assuredly the NHRA professional ranks. And I'm with you, man. I don't see it ending anytime soon. Was I surprised early on? Absolutely. But knowing Mike as well as I do, which isn't, super well, but well enough, I do see a guy who wants to win, who treats everything, who competes everywhere he goes. No matter what it is, he wants to compete, and he expects a lot of himself. He holds himself to a high standard, and I see a guy that would be damned to be the weak link. And I had him say that to me on multiple instances. In 2019, I spent a ton of time with Mike, and he would almost always tell me that he just felt like he was the weak link on the team. And I knew in my mind, like, there's no way that he's just going to let that be the case, right? And here we are, proof positive that he was not.
Scrapper's racing. Scrappy. He's had to claw his way, built his business. This is a dude with no quit and is not afraid of some struggles. And I think we're seeing the fruits of him working through those struggles.
There's no doubt, man. So one last little script read here before we dive into our next question of the day. And I'm just going to say, remember, friends and racers, the Wes Buck Show is brought to you by the team at Elite HP, the world leader in used race cars, racing engines, parts, and tools, located in Fort Worth, Texas, right down the road from me. And come see me when you come see them. Elite HP is operated by real deal drag racers with over 100 years of combined racing experience who can steer you in the right direction for all of your racing needs, whether it's a turnkey Pro Mod car or a set of Pro Jacks. You can check out their entire inventory. I do it frequently at EliteHP.com. I tell you what, I encourage you to go buy something, but it's fun just to look. They've always got some crazy Pro Mod car, or 3,000 horsepower Lamborghini, or a smoking deal on something. Check it out, EliteHP.com. Mike, last question of the day, buddy. We'd be crazy not to talk about it because we're going to get a little bit of a break. How about it? After 4 back-to-back races, the No Prep Kings series is taking a break about a month now until early August, I believe, where they will return to action. But
mid-August, actually.
Mid-August, yeah, like the 12th
Tulsa.
Or something. Yeah, Tulsa.
Yeah, 14th or something like that. 12th.
Unbelievable, man. I bet they're not going to know what to do with themselves. But how about it? Ryan Martin wins again. Wins Friday night and Saturday, 5 of 8 on the season. Dominating performance, man. We
just
also
like we
saw,
said, man, they got a Ryan Martin problem.
They got a Ryan Martin problem, man. I don't. We asked,
and
the
that's
question.
A compliment. That's a positive statement. That's a compliment.
It is a compliment, man, and I think it's an incredible thing what he's doing, especially when you see the effort and energy that some of these other teams are putting into this stuff. I mean, you've got John Odom and Jim Howe like bringing out brand new cars. You got Disco Dean bringing out a brand new car. You got Larry Larson and Jeff Lutz in the mix, right?
And you got Kai Kelly.
A
new shocker.
Oh yeah,
in Tulsa. Larry Jeffers built shocker. Kai, you've got Ryan on here on your stats. 5 of 8. The 2 of those 3 that were remaining have been won by Kai.
He was tied for first in the points last week before this event. So
Kai put on social earlier this week just a couple spy shots of the new car and said a fireball extinguisher is coming to Tulsa.
I saw that, man. I like it, dude. And I hope that's the case. I really do. Not because I don't like to see Ryan Martin win, but I just think it's going to add to the storyline because I don't know who else is going to come along and derail him. We've obviously seen there's plenty of fast cars out here. Another one, Mike Bowman, another guy got a brand new car from Jerry Bickle that is a purpose-built No Prep Kings car. I can't imagine he's going to be a guy that's not in the thick of things in the very near future, to be honest with you. But no, it's who's going to unseat Ryan Martin? It's yet to be seen, man. I don't know that anybody's going to get it done. I think he's a lock to win the champ. I'm not trying to give up on it. I guess there's a lot of racing left, right? We've got still half the season. Don't they do 15 races, Mike?
Yeah, I think we're either at the halfway point or
right around it, just beyond. So there's a whole lot of racing left, but I just don't see any chance that he steps on his toe at this point. I mean, it's going to take some sort of ongoing gremlin, or it's going to take some outside forces, in my opinion, to derail the missile that is Ryan Martin and that Fireball Camaro right now.
Unreal.
It is crazy,
by
dude.
that. Hey, what about this deal? We were going to talk a little bit about the small tire thing that they're doing at No Prep Kings.
Yeah, man, I can talk about this a lot because I'm actually quite impressed with it. We may save some of this conversation, but yeah, the thing is that where I'll leave it, I guess, is just that they're doing so many things right.
Yeah,
they really are. And it's almost, I don't want to come off as a fanboy because I'm sure there's shortcomings and I'm sure there's things that we don't know or whatever. But man, when I look at all the things that No Prep Kings are doing, I just don't see any missteps, man. I love the way they created this Friday night deal. They've given people a reason to buy a ticket on Friday night. They've given with the Grade 8 deal. Now they have this new local only deal. Local 8, I think is what it's called, where it's like an 8-car shootout where it's local cars only. I don't know exactly how that, what the threshold or what the parameters for being local is.
The winner races
one of the stars of Street Outlaws.
It's like pros versus Joes.
I mean, I'm just telling you, what a brilliant idea. I've been a big fan of this. I mean, as a race promoter myself, historically, I've always wanted to make sure there was something going on. Like when we brought the World Series of Pro Mod to Denver for the first time in 17? Yeah, in 2017, we wanted to make sure that there was like a fast bracket class for the locals to come participate in. We did a big payout Top Sportsman, Top Dragster race because they have a huge contingent of Top Sportsman, Top Dragster racers out there because it's so important to get that buy-in from the locals.
That's the number one feedback I got. When I talk to people at our races in Denver, man, this is just the coolest thing ever to be out here racing my car with, you name it, Pro Mod racer or whatever.
Stevie Jackson and Erica Enders.
This is such a big deal.
It's such a big deal, man. And I think about it, and that, when I look at the World Door Slammer Nationals, our event that we did for 2 years in Orlando, that was, if there was a misstep that we had in the second year, a great event, but we were out of room to really embrace the local crowd. And so we elected to only have our essentially pro classes and our high level sportsman classes. And it's something that I lost sleep over. There was some of my favorite memories from that event in its first year in 2020, believe it or not, right before the world began to burn. Some of my fondest memories of the whole deal were the locals, the guys that were so excited to be in the staging lane.
The guy that did a burnout.
The guy that did a burnout. Yeah, James Thompson did a burnout in the winner's circle on all those hundreds, fake hundreds. I mean, all of that are some of my fondest memories. And I just know that the Street Outlaws group are clearly some smart guys because they're recognizing there's free advertising there. There is ongoing positive sentiment created there. You get people excited about the tradition of it. There's just, it taps into a whole different world when you start to get that local involvement and you start to grow something organically and you're not just 100% reliant on, your radio advertising or your billboards, because you create a word of mouth that is powerful, man. And again, I mean, you're right. We had a whole segment kind of built around this. I think we actually should bring this up next week and talk about it at length because, I mean, it's something I'd love to see the NHRA do. They used to do stuff like this. And I'm not saying you bring John Force up to run, somebody in their street car, but maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I would be all for, if a first round or second round loser in NHRA Pro Stock, match racing somebody, with a local Top Sportsman car or something. I mean, doing some of those
maybe
things.
It doesn't have as much of a fit there, but this is
Right,
they're putting
I'm just
on a
saying.
show. They're putting on a show at No Prep Kings, and it's it's refreshing to hear them coming up with these new ideas and things that like you go, hey, that's a pretty good idea. Like that could work, and I could see it. That's smart. And while we had the Elite HP up there on the bottom, I wanted to say we got to talk about Marty Robertson in the
Holy
Future Street
cow,
Outlaws
man.
this past weekend in Houston. Took home that win. We're already seeing that team prove its worth with Patrick Barnhill tuning, got all the best equipment. Will we continue to see that? And I wonder when does Marty get the chance to move up?
Manny Bajinga. Will we see Manny Bajinga back in? I mean, I personally am feeling some really worthwhile storylines in this Future Outlaws category. I can't imagine having a car like the Badfish Barracuda and that caliber of team. And, not to mention, the Manny Bajinga's operation. I think those cars fit. I think
Manny
those
was not
teams
there this
fit.
past weekend.
No,
right?
he wasn't there.
Had
yeah.
an obligation.
Yeah. So I don't know if we'll see those guys back. I mean, I think Manny came in with a point to prove, won 4 races in a row. Really impressive performance. But yeah, huge shout out to Marty Robertson, longtime supporters of ours, Elite HP here at the West Buck Show. And it's just great to see him have some success. I think that Marty's like right at home with a gazillion people on the starting line and all that buzz and excitement. He loves that. I mean, anytime that Marty and I would like go to a race or go to one of these street, to late night events or whatever, he just loves it. He loves being at the racetrack at 1:00 in the morning and hanging out with his buddies. And he loves that street race vibe. And man, they do a fantastic job of capturing it. It's obviously organized and it's obviously legal, but they capture that outlaw energy that is pretty hard to find in drag racing at this point in time. So no, man, kudos to those guys. They've won me over, I have to say. And I never wasn't a fan, but I just didn't know. I didn't know. I wasn't sure. Is this a spinoff? Is this a cash grab? Is it just, hey, we can sell TV shows, so let's make TV shows. Let's make as many as we can. But what I see them doing just time and time again is the right thing. And I don't think there's a better example, to be honest, than this local deal. Like giving these guys that are weekend warriors, regular Joes, an opportunity to come out and race in front of a huge crowd. And then ultimately, like this past week or a couple weeks ago in Brainerd, there was a Canadian small tire racer that came down from Canada, brought his team. And I mean, I don't know the man personally, but by all accounts, it was like the highlight of his life, his racing career, to get to race Lizzie Musey. I mean, how cool, what a cool story. And I just think they're doing a fantastic job. And every time I hear the next thing they're doing or the next thing they're trying, I'm yet to hear any that I don't like. There may be some coming that I don't like, but so far so good, man. And I'm 100% a believer. I'm a fan. I'm 100% a fan, dude. So, hey, Mike, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. This was a good one. You like this time frame, speeding it up a little bit?
Yeah, I do. What about JT? We got to let everyone know where JT did make it back from
unfortunately did not make it back from Mexico.
Not in time. Or he may not make it back at all. We're not sure.
We have no idea.
He could be in jail. He could be, we don't know what he's doing.
The only communication we've had from JT over the course of the last 7 days have been social media stories. Him posting on Facebook randomly. I noticed that their group got bigger, and that's what JT does. Like, I start seeing people, the first photo he posts, I recognize everyone. The next photo, there's 4 or 5 strangers. The next photo, there's like 8 to 10 total strangers. Who are these people? Why are they in your photo?
Man.
Dude, they're his best friends. I guarantee you, he walked out of that pool yesterday at 4 a.m. or whatever, fist bumping people who are all saying, "See you later, T. Nice to meet you, man." Guaranteed. 100% guaranteed.
We'll come visit you in La Plata.
Yeah, we'll be up there for Soybean Festival. Don't worry. We'll be there. Oh my gosh. Well, I hope you had fun, JT. We'll be looking forward to having you back in the studio with us next Wednesday. Guys, seriously, all of y'all, thank you so much for being a part of this. Mike, thank you. Of course, Dion in the production room, taking care of things on the ones and twos. Thank you guys, and all of you, all of our sponsors, but more importantly, the drag racing community. We couldn't do this show without y'all. The enthusiasm, the conversation, it means the world to us, and we really truly do feel that we're doing good things for the sport of drag racing. We're trying to keep this conversation going through the week, and we couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you so much, and we will see you next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Mike and I headed out of town this week to go talk a little business with a print shop, eh? Golly, we got to go work. I would just as soon talk about drag racing. Could we get that going again?
Well, that's why we're doing this today. We couldn't miss it.
Oh, yeah. It's all good. All right, guys. Thanks a bunch. We'll talk soon.
See you guys.